Everybody, this is Dr. Mike in Milwaukee, and we got with us today Dr. Frank. Dr. Frank, where are you from again?
I'm in New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay. All right. So today, again, we're going to be doing the Rays of the Dawn, and we're going to be doing the Prejudice chapter. So let's get into it.
Let's go.
All right. So prejudice, in the broadest sense, includes all of the innate capacities and all the acquired tendencies that create a behavior bias in a human being. In its more restricted sense, however, prejudice may be defined as a premature judgment bias, often grounded on sentiment, ideas, or associations. The prejudiced mind is a closed mind, narrow, biased, and opinionated, one that is inclined to pass judgment before making a full and complete inquiry. In this sense, prejudice is regarded as an evil, an undesirable trait, and it constitutes a retarding force in our evolutionary process. We may divide prejudices into two categories: beneficial and destructive. When confronted with an issue in which we must make a decision, we have the right and privilege to investigate all angles and phases of the situation. That procedure indicates precaution and equity and should be encouraged. But after careful investigation, we find that our prejudice is unjustified, then persistence in our biased attitude constitutes a distinct evil. We should eliminate it from our consciousness.
So, Dr. Mike, let me ask you a question on that. So you've got two paragraphs right there. So, what do you think Dr. Fleet's trying to say there in those two paragraphs thus far?
So to me, I'm thinking that we don't need to necessarily accept every idea automatically. We need to kind of leave it in an unbiased platform, and we need to look at the entire picture. So we're kind of looking at it with a criticizing eye, but it's almost like a neutral, right? You're analyzing it, and we got to be mindful of, once we look at everything and we see like what's the right thing, what's the wrong thing, to be able to make those changes accordingly. What about you?
Wonderful. Yeah, great. I think the one sentence here where he says, when confronted with an issue in which we must make a decision, we have the right and privilege to investigate all angles and phases of the situation. And that procedure indicates precaution and equity and should be encouraged, right? And equity and should be encouraged. So to me, I was taught a long time ago, I think where Dr. Fleet's going with this, I think, is that, to piggyback on what you just said, to add to it, I think there's a big difference between judging and being judgmental. To me, like, and I don't know if this is the definition of the words, but how I've kind of quantified it in my mind to have a better understanding and practice it in my life is where, look, we're making judging decisions all day, every day. We do. I mean, you do, I do, all the listeners and the viewers right now, that you do as well, because you may encounter someone and get friendly with somebody and say, wow, I really like that person. I would like to befriend that person. And there's other times where you encounter people and you're like, ooh, stay away. That's a judgment. That's a judging call. I think being judgmental, what Dr. Fleet's talking about earlier in the earlier paragraph, is like with having a premature opinion and or judgment call on someone before you have all the facts and don't see it from their view. And then on top of that, you add the person to the judging part of it, where you say, not only is that behavior bad, or I don't agree with that, but you are too. That's how I've kind of
yeah, and that kind of, it makes me think about when people talk about don't judge a book by its cover. And sometimes I'll say slightly tongue-in-cheek, where I'll say, well, books have covers for a reason, right? And I think it's important, that distinction where we don't dismiss the information that we're seeing. Like, we need to look at the facts, look what's in front of us. But once we gain more information, we should, if we don't have enough information, we shouldn't be able to make a strong judgment. We're still in the process of judging, analyzing. But I think also sometimes we have information we know is faulty. We know it's not a complete picture. It's not fair, but we still hold on to those biases. I think that's one of the things he's warning us against.
Totally. And let's remember the name of the chapter is Prejudice and Intolerance,
Yeah.
right? All right, so I got the next two paragraphs.
Yep.
Cool. So in the light of prejudice, we interpret events and project our fears and hopes onto them. Our distinctive way of thinking and believing influences how we judge or misjudge others. Kind of just what we were alluding to.
Yep.
Prejudice forms the eyeglasses through which we view the world and thus molds and shapes both our impressions of the world and our reaction to those impressions.
So I mean, like even right there, we're looking at people, events, whatever we're judging, but we have to be careful because what he's saying here is that I'm superimposing my fears and beliefs and judgments on top of something that might just be neutral, and that's a reflection of me, not them.
Absolutely. And I think to compound that, he's also saying where you're at here and in here and how you're viewing things. Let's put it this way. I had someone say to me years ago, the world looks a whole lot better when you feel good. When you feel bad, the world doesn't look so hot. But when you feel good, man, those are different lenses, right? So you gotta be careful where you're coming from, right?
Yep.
Whenever someone expresses individuality, a difference of any kind or manner, prejudice asserts itself. We readily make the false deduction from difference to inferiority or superiority, to the degree that vanity and egoism dominate our behavior. We are inclined to assume that our point of view is the correct one. If others differ, they must be wrong. If they're all unlike us, they must be inferior. That's two paragraphs right there. I'm going to stop right there, and I'll just say I do not want this conversation and this session that you and I are doing to become political whatsoever. I want it to be apolitical. I would never bring that up. But I will just say that those two paragraphs bring to mind the I think the prejudging and the intolerance, and quite frankly, what I might refer to as the double standard in our world, in our country right now, where it doesn't matter what sector you're from. I personally could give a hoot less. I don't care. Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, whatever the terms you want to use, they don't mean a whole lot to me because I think they've all lost their true meaning and their fervor anyways. It doesn't make a difference. But I think that there's a little bit of a mindset in the country right now where people say that we live in a democracy which is supposed to be open, like you can have your view and I can have my view, and then we meet somewhere in the middle and we make good decisions together. But I think the theme is more become, hey, listen, you know what? You can have your opinion, I can have mine, but if yours is not mine, you're wrong. And I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to bash you until I prove that you're wrong, which is, I think, what he's referencing here.
Yeah, I always think about, it's like, I like to sometimes I always like to analyze myself before I analyze anybody else, because I'm like, all right, hold on. Have I had certain opinions? Yes. Have I also changed those opinions? Yes. So why would I, judge or have a intolerance towards other people? Because just like I've changed my opinion, they might change theirs soon, very soon too. Like it might be different tomorrow. So that's why I kind of like let people kind of do their own thing, right? I got my opinion. I always feel like I'm right. Everyone else feels like they're right, but we all can't be right. And so it's interesting that we always have that idea of I'm right, somebody else is wrong. Whereas we just as easily could say like, I'm probably wrong. You might be right. Let me learn more about it. That would be just as easy.
Mm-hmm. And or even though I disagree with you, doesn't mean I hate you. Right.
Because I don't have all the information. How could I? I might not know enough.
Correct.
So on that note, whenever the element of rivalry enters the picture, our prejudice is intensified and often blazes forth in dramatic competition. Wars have always magnified and intensified all sorts of prejudices, making it more difficult to maintain world peace and harmony. Nearly every person is a crank on some subject or other. Strengthened by conviction and sentiment, mere opinion and belief dominate our thinking to the extent of obstructing our outlook, clouding our vision, and preventing us from seeing the facts. We dislike following any line of thought or reasoning that is antagonistic to a strong emotional prejudice. The emotional intensity and the quality of the sentiments attached determine the degree to which prejudice can hold and sway the human mind. Okay.
All right, I don't have any additional thoughts. That I think that's
I
pretty
like that one kind of
self-explanatory. Yeah.
filter down. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're up.
All of us have experiences implanted deep in the subconscious memory that help form our opinions and limit our judgment. By the way, for the viewers, nobody, if you don't know this, the subconscious mind basically is developed, give or take, around 7 years old, maybe a little bit before, maybe a little bit afterwards. If you're not aware of that, I'm sharing with you that that's when that stuff is downloaded, because you're a wide open book, or you're wide open at that time, and you just receive, and that basically formulates your thoughts and your behaviors and your likes and dislikes and your thought processes. Just saying.
Yeah, I like the analogy of like you're born as an empty hard drive. From 0 to 7, anyone can download information, new songs, new programs, new ideas about the world. And then after about 7, then you can start to reason through, is this true or is it not? But unless you do some specific work, all those beliefs and the way you see the world are probably going to stay there for the rest of your life, unless certain things happen to change it.
Exactly. So right here he says, too often these experiences would not endure the test of right reason, and the impressions they produce tend to delude and misguide us. Consequently, our minds become confused and imprisoned by prejudices, biases, set opinions, odd ideas, and taboos. Without investigating causes and effects, we confidently turn to these subconscious memories for direction in meeting, quote unquote, real life situations. Only when we inquire into experiences and measure effects in the light of their origin can we hope to use experience as a reliable guide.
There's a lot in there. So we're judging the world based upon how we feel like the world should be. And I feel like those tendencies, those views of how we think the world should be is typically built from 0 to 7. So the way our parents view the world, the way that, the events that we go through, and sometimes we did certain things that at that time were appropriate, maybe what you're going through, but it's no longer an appropriate strategy moving forward in your life. If you keep on relying those, you're going to be stuck and you can't really progress.
And what's interesting about that is, even if the subconscious beliefs that were developed from 0 to 7, give or take, were good ones, well, and that's a relative term as well, because what's good for someone is bad for another, right? But let's just say that you think they're good, they're not harming anybody, your thoughts are that you're for the people, you might even practice the principle of oneness, that we're all one, and you come from that position of love, etc. Even those views, right and or wrong, can still, like he says right here, confuse you and imprison you into prejudice, bias, and set opinions, I think. Mm-hmm. So you really have to be very, very, very aware of where you're coming from and the lenses that you're viewing things through.
Yeah, it's when I hear that, I'm thinking about, we put ourselves in boxes with these labels. We love to label things. We like to put things in boxes, and whether that box is a good box or not, it is limiting us. And I think we just need to be cognizant of that and know anytime I got a label, there's automatically some kind of bias I'm putting on everything. Maybe good, maybe bad, but just recognizing we are putting that there.
Absolutely.
Our false memories of experiences submerged in the ignorance-bound regions of the mind often produces masses of likes and dislikes, ideas of right and wrong, as well as conscience and belief. When called on to answer a question or make a decision about a subject of which we have only limited knowledge, our tendency is to call up false memories, which then color and sway our thinking. We should instead pursue an unbiased investigation of facts to guide us in making judgments or drawing conclusions. Prejudice is usually considered an evil, but however, much may be disapproved of its existence. We cannot dispense with it. To entirely eliminate prejudice from human experience would require renouncing all convictions, all conventions, beliefs, principles, and conscience itself. A principled person maintains an open mind to all issues and does not pass judgment until after making a thorough, unbiased investigation of facts. That person asserts his or her own rights, but at the same time respects the rights and privileges of others, permitting them the freedom to think and believe in accordance with their understanding. To me, I just hear the idea of, hey, how do you feel about this topic? I don't know. I don't know enough to have a strong opinion. It's a very powerful way to go through the world, I feel.
I agree. You and I both know Dr. Peter Goldman. He's a mentor of ours, and he quotes a metaphysician from back in the day by the name of Gurdjieff many times. And I believe it was him or Ouspensky, one or the other, that said something along the lines of that most human beings are liars. And the way that we lie is that we speak of things as if we can know about something, and we do know about something, when in fact we might even can't know about something and we don't know about something. And I think it goes along the lines of this, where you've got to check yourself at the door, and it's okay to say, I don't know. And it's even more okay to say, to not have an intolerance for something that you really don't know about, or even have an additional prejudice against something that you really don't know about or you can't know about.
Mm-hmm. And it honestly, so when I really started to practice this more and embody it more, it takes such a weight off your shoulder. Like, you don't need to know everything. You don't always need to have all the right answers. You know, we can always learn something from other people. Is instead of coming in hard, to come in just kind of open and soft and be able to learn from something. And at the end of the day, the more I learn from you, the more my value goes up. So it's in my best interest just to be neutral until I know. It's not a theory, not an opinion, but it's a fact. Then I can really speak on something, right?
Absolutely. By means of prejudice, we protect ourselves against unpleasant, undesirable, and thus usually destructive tendencies that militate against our integrity, our peace of mind, our settled convictions. But when prejudice becomes a retarding factor in progress and cooperation, then it is an evil and destroys the very objective it seeks to achieve. Prejudice leads to intolerance, and intolerance leads to criticism and self-condemnation. Intolerance may be defined as lack of forbearance, narrow-mindedness with regard to the opinions and beliefs of others, and inability to endure. It is the inability to understand intellectually and to accept emotionally the facts as they are. So right there, I mean, he's talking about, you know, when he brings the factor of, you know, intolerance leads to criticism, which leads to criticism and potentially self-condemnation.
Condemnation.
If you think about that, I think what he might be saying there is simply, the more you judge, the more you're judgmental, the more you do that, the more you're going to be critical of yourself. And then that's going to turn into you condemning yourself.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's this idea, it's a theory, right? It may be true, it may not be, but they say is like, you know, someone who's afraid of being judged will always judge other people. Maybe to like beat them to the punch, maybe like they're gonna judge me, so I can whatever the mechanism is, it seems, just from my own view of the world and what I've gone through, it seems to be pretty accurate. The people that are most afraid of getting hurt tend to hurt other people. The people that are most, they say it's like, if you want to attract loyal people, first thing you got to do is become loyal yourself.
Absolutely. Dr. Mike, tie this into, because you and I both practice a technique called zone technique. And we know that it's not cookbook. However, there are certain emotions, there are certain levels of the emotion of the human persona that lead to the short circuiting of the body, and it can interfere with certain systems, right? You know, like the glandular system or the digestive system. Where would you say that this emotion, this act of prejudice or intolerance might show up?
My first reaction would be the digestive system with its connection to, anger, irritation, which on the flip side would be a lack of patience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we can be
Frustration,
patient and kind
disgust.
of just hold back a little bit and just wait and see and gather more information. So that would be my first inclination. My second actually might have been the eliminative zone due to resistance to change.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
So just, I mean, equally, I totally agree. Um, and it's interesting because if you share with people, which I know that you do, that just about 90%, if not more than 90% of the time, the things that manifest in the body start at the emotional level. This is where you might speak to them from. You're not having a psychology session with them, but I'm just saying, if you sense that something like this is going on, you and I might refer to this book and say, hey, by the way, I want you to read something, right? But I think what I would like people that are listening and watching right now is just to understand that this particular, mind emotion, as Dr. Flea talks about, like negative emotion, so to speak, it can lead to digestive and elimination problems, like flat out. And why would you want to do that? Why not get better at this?
And especially those times when, you tried everything. You tried, the different therapies, you tried the medication, you tried all these different things, and maybe it got better, but it came back, and,
Or you've had an endoscope, you've had a colonoscope, you've had, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not making fun of those tests or saying that you shouldn't get them done when they're appropriate, but like, I'm like up to here with that kind of stuff at some point too, because it's like, well, they didn't find anything. It's unremarkable. It's unremarkable. It's unremarkable. And then we come along and say, hey, by the way, it might be connected to this. And they're like, what? But then they see the result, and then there's a different vibe.
right. It's like, the only reason why we're even going through these emotions is really it's because we're doctors of chiropractic. That just happens to be the way we heal people. I'm addressing these things because of its relevance to people healing on my table, their physical health. Now, of course, it's going to have other effects on their body, mind, and soul, the whole trinity. But for its relation to you getting better, getting out of pain, improving your digestion, or whatever else is being thrown off by, because again, Dr. Frame, if somebody said, well, how does these emotions cause those physical things in the body? What would your thoughts be on that?
How an emotion can short circuit the system.
Yeah. Like how does criticism lead to digestion being off?
Well, to your point before, so criticism could be along the lines of when you're criticizing and you're being prejudiced and you're intolerant of things. They're the emotions of repressed anger, frustration, disgust, not wanting to have change, or feeling change that is coming your way and you're just totally not accepting of it whatsoever. Those types of emotions, based on what I've seen, short circuits the brain centers, because how do we get stressed physically, chemically, and emotionally. And I'm saying that the emotion one is top on the list, where the body physiologically changes with those emotions. If you check like cortisol levels and adrenaline levels and blood and urine and all that kind of stuff, while a person is under that emotional state of anger as opposed to relaxation, that's a completely different chemistry, you're going to say. Correct. So not that we are going to do that. I'm just saying, but there's been studies that show that. And you can just see, and we've seen through history with zone technique, with chiropractic, with the healing arts, that certain emotions can create those, short circuit the system to allow those other symptoms, disease processes, whatever you want to call them, to manifest in the body.
Yep. Excellent.
All right, I think you're up.
All right. We're on the top of 102?
Yes.
All right. We are in the habit of being intolerant. We allow ourselves to be disturbed by the shortcomings and mistakes of others and of ourselves. We concentrate on insignificant details and petty differences. We fail to understand the operation of the law of opposites and the law of cause and effect. Intolerance of others leads to criticism. Intolerance of ourselves leads to self-blame and feelings of guilt. Too often, intolerance is not the result of what we think, but of how we feel about any particular person, institution, or idea. We are victims of intolerance for as long as we analyze and interpret facts through our emotions. Only through reason do we attain genuine understanding and tolerance. When we feel superior purely on the basis of being born into a particular race, we become intolerant of race, creed, and color. We often boast of tolerance in religion, but in reality, question the integrity of anyone of a different faith. How open-minded is someone who concedes that all truth is relative, but who then becomes emotionally upset when someone else expresses ideas that contradict his or her own viewpoint?
With a question mark, right? Because that's the question.
With a question mark. You know, and just the main thing I see from there is when we're in a certain emotional state or have an emotion about a certain category of people, places, things, like you said, it's like putting a set of orange colored glasses, like it colors the way you see them, colors the way you interpret the neutral facts of what the situation actually is. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. Like, you're not purely analytical. There are emotions coming through, and the more we can recognize that, the more we can mitigate and limit its unnecessarily negative or evil effects that that lens can have on us.
Totally agree, 100%. All right, let's hit this up. So, yes, we profess that others have the right to solve their problems according to their own dictates, but still we find fault and criticize anyone whose code of behavior is different from our own. As long as we continue feeling tense and irritated by whatever does not conform to our particular desires, that's what I was talking about before, what you said, how does it affect the body? Those emotions right there, as far as, you know, feeling irritated, certainly affect your nerves and short circuit things. Notions or prejudices, we are ignorant of the meaning of tolerance. It is spirit's nature to express itself in many ways and in many forms. If there were no change, no diversity, life would become dull and uninteresting. The spirit within must, of necessity, express itself through the medium which it has created. Some media are destined to be on a lower scale than others, and their expression, therefore, is different. And here again, the law of opposites is in operation. Without knowledge of perfection, we could not be conscious of imperfection. Therefore, in order to progress, we must have both. From these expressions, we gain knowledge that enables us to choose and to progress, not retrogress accordingly. I would say right there, just a note there, I would just say, if you're a human being that wants to progress in life, and I'm not, whatever progression means to you, I'm not talking about finances, although it could be that. If it's your health, it could be that. If it's your wealth, it could be that. If it's your relationship, it could be that. If it's your own personal behavior, whatever that is, you want to abide by this type of stuff. You want to listen to what's going on here and not do what they're saying in the book, because it will stifle your progress. You'll retrogress. You not only won't progress, you'll go backwards.
In probably all of those areas. You know, when I made certain shifts, the biggest shifts that I've personally made is not when I started to do certain things, is when I stopped doing certain things. And when I learned stop judging other people and stop criticizing myself and other people, that's when I've had the biggest bumps up in my health and in my routines and my happiness and income too, I'm sure, you know. Like, these are real, they're very real, tangible effects from changing the way we interpret and we interact with the world.
Amen to that. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything is already there. Everything is already at our disposal. So as I see it, if you want to progress and you want to be successful in whatever success means to you, it's not only so much a process of adding anything, it's more subtracting.
Yeah.
It's stop doing certain things, because everything's already there, and then you can choose what you're going to do or not. But all you have to do is subtract some stuff, like being prejudiced and intolerant. It'll go a long way.
You know, he talks about evolution in whatever form he's talking about. And to me, it's like just recognizing, is spring better than summer, summer better than fall? Like, they're all necessary pieces to the entirety of what's going on. And if someone happens to be in spring and I happen to be in summer, Doesn't mean it's just they're in a different stage than I'm in. Maybe I'm ahead of them, maybe I'm not. I'm ahead of them in some areas and behind in others. Just to recognize, be like, yeah, I used to be there. Like, I understand what you're going through. Don't worry, better times are ahead. Like, having that almost, I've been there helping them, or they say, hey, you know, you've been through this. How can you help me? Guide me through, avoid the problem. It's very healthy.
Because there's rhythms in life, right? There's rhythms, there's ups, there's downs, but there's rhythms. And you have a lot of rhythm, because I understand you, for people who don't know, you're a great dancer. Just saying.
Dance a little bit. Got in trouble. All right. So all persons, nations, and races are an integral part of the great scheme of things. Can we say that any race, religious sect, or class of people is inferior and therefore to be despised, mistreated, and cast off? Are we justified in denying them their right and freedom just because their traditions, standards, customs, and belief differ from ours? Why should the color of a person's skin, mode of their dress, or religious worship make them the victim of criticism, condemnation, or ridicule? Everyone must express themselves according to their ability and to the limit of their understanding. Therefore, as long as we do not interfere with the welfare of others, who has the right to deny anyone of their way of living and thinking? Who has the authority to judge others? It is only natural and normal that we have individual preferences, but we should not become obsessed with our own ideas and opinions. Everyone is traveling the path, each seeking their highest good according to their own understanding. No one is perfect. All of us have our limitations, yet we all struggle onward. And someday, each of us, in our own way, will attain our goal.
So there he goes again. He's saying it in a different way, but he's saying that same theme, which is like, you know, he asked the question, he probably would want to put an explanation point there, like, and who has the authority to judge others? Like, are you kidding me? We're all imperfect. You're imperfect. I'm imperfect. We're all in this thing together. We're in this thing called life. How dare you? How dare you? Would you do that? And on top of that, it leads to so many other things, because you're going to self-condemn yourself and self-criticize yourself because you're judging other people as well. And not for anything, do you want to be judged? I don't think so. In fact, I highly doubt it. Right?
Right.
Okay. So, all right. So we're on 103 at the bottom paragraph, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So what undreamed of heights might we achieve if we would only realize with understanding that there is only one mighty essence permeating all creation? Obedience to the laws of life will elevate us to these heights. When enough of us, through obedience to these laws, automatically cease elevating ourselves to the detriment of others, real unity will be assured. Peace, happiness, and understanding will then prevail throughout the world. In a progressive world, there is no place for intolerance. Think about that. In a progressive world, there is no place for intolerance. Humanity is rapidly increasing its storehouse of knowledge. Science is ever discovering new methods of improving our daily lives. Yet, if we look at history, we find that the actions of our intolerant ancestors prohibited the world for a time from receiving the full benefits of such great inventions as the automobile, the airplane, the steamboat, and the telephone. The inventors of these devices were persecuted by the prejudices and intolerances of narrow-minded, biased, critical, and jealous individuals who feared that their security was threatened. Isn't that what it's mostly about, Dr. Mike, don't you think?
I think that's a really nice, kind of in a nutshell, what this is really talking about, because it's saying like it's making it so much more real world practical, in that our judgment of things should be a certain way, that is directly limiting your ability to progress, to come up with new ideas. And every time somebody had a great new idea, it was always persecuted. And we look back and we say, oh, you know, Dr. P will use this example sometimes. And he's like, you know, it's 2020 right now. And we have the top, you know, research and the science and all these amazing things. But if we go back 100 years, we're laughing at what they did. Be like, I can't believe we thought that was science, right? But in 100 years, we're gonna be laughing at most of the stuff we're doing today. So to be humble and say, could something be viewed differently? Could it be improved upon?
And just remember in that last sentence, he says, the inventors of these devices were persecuted by the prejudices and tolerances of narrow-minded, biased, critical, and jealous individuals, watch this, key word, who feared that security was threatened. I don't know, based on what you've read, what I've read, what some of the listeners and viewers have read, a lot of these emotions we're talking about are primarily from the primal emotion, which is fear. Fear kills. Fear emanates into all these other emotions. So
I thought about that. I had an idea. I don't know if it's sound, but I'll just bounce it off you and see how you feel about it. So with all these different laws of the mind and these negative emotions, such as prejudice and intolerance, I always thought to myself, if it's true that fear is the foundation of all these negative feelings and emotions and laws, could in any situation, if someone's judging me, do you think it would be smart to say, okay, if I know fear is the core of it, to ask, okay, they're judging somebody, what are they afraid of? What are they fearful of? Or if somebody's, has vanity or something like that, what are they fearful of? How do you feel about that idea?
I think it's right on. And then to piggyback on that, I would then check yourself, like you said before, then say, what am I afraid of? Right? Or help yourself in the situation and just simply make a declaration in your mind and say, I'm not afraid. This is not, I'm not fearful of this at all. I'm not afraid of this person, thing, circumstance, whatever.
Another little angle consideration to say is, I am afraid, and that's okay. And I'm still going to keep my mind open.
Absolutely.
Insecurity is probably the basic reason for our intolerance, as it is for many other destructive attitudes. Nothing is fixed or assured. In our external environment, as well as from within ourselves, we are exposed to dangers that challenge our physical, mental, and spiritual security. Every other little security-seeking ego represents a potential danger to our own welfare. Thus, we become the victims of fear, jealousy, envy, prejudice, and intolerance, and the score of other evil tendencies. And while we attempt to attain happiness and peace, in our ignorance we destroy it, or at least we make it a more remote and difficult to attain. All new systems of thought must undergo a form of crucifixion before being accepted by the world. People blindly cling to their old beliefs and ideas and opinions and traditions while closing their minds to anything new or different that might contradict or expose some of their convictions. Not only do such people have a closed mind to any new system of thought or religion, but they ruthlessly attack, without investigation, anything that might shatter the foundation of their ways of thinking or believing. Remember this saying, condemnation without investigation is a mark of ignorance. It is wrong to unsettle the minds of those who are not ready to accept the truth. Oof. That reminds me, would you say that's a correlation with the Bible verse saying, don't cast your pearls among the swine?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's what he's talking about. Only those who are ready will investigate with an open mind and will cast off the mantle of false beliefs, prejudices, and intolerances. Once freed of its old masquerade, the real self with a broader and deeper understanding will embark on its crusade onward and upward to a better life. So with that, what, if this is your first time reading this, maybe it is, maybe it's not, what would you say, reading everything and internalizing it, would be like that single thought that you try to carry with you throughout the day to really encapsulate this entire chapter? What might that be for you?
I think practicing the principle of oneness can go a long way here. And for those who might not be familiar, I mean, the principle of oneness, it's just basically what it states, that we're one. And even when you say the word we, it still even implies separation and many. So you could say, there is only one thing, and I am that. That's one way. You've heard that before, Dr. Mike, I know that. And so to make that more pragmatic in life, I would say to practice less prejudice less intolerance, less criticism, less condemnation, less self-condemnation. Just come from the perspective of oneness, come from the perspective of that I am you, you are me, we're this one thing, we're the same. I like you, I like me, I like it all, you know? And that's not to say, because Dr. Fleet says earlier in the chapter, listen, you've got to investigate, you're allowed to investigate. In fact, you should investigate, you should make a decision about things. He's not saying that. He's not saying don't do that. He's just saying, be careful when you judge. You'll be judged too. You don't want to be judged. It leads to your demise. It doesn't bring you up. It doesn't progress you. It retrogresses you. Just know that.
And being really mindful of our, like, this spirit behind the judging, right? Because that kind of says, like, am I judging it to try to ascertain its truth and validity, or am I judging because I'm afraid to really really put, like, my beliefs under the test of the fire, right?
Yeah.
I think we're fearful of that. So for me, I think my takeaway is to really embrace the power and the I guess you could say confidence that comes with, I don't know. Anytime there's someone's doing it one way, I'm doing it another, which is right. I don't know. I'm still going to investigate. I'm still going to try to figure it out. But in the meantime, I don't know.
Works for me. Very, very powerful. It doesn't give you, it doesn't let you off the hook, but it certainly gives you a reprieve, and then you can back up and like the statement says, it says condemnation without investigation is a mark of ignorance. So if I told you, Dr. Mike, you're ignorant, you probably wouldn't like that statement, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And if anybody's listening and watching doesn't want to be ignorant or, practice a level of ignorance, it says right there, which I think is very powerful. Condemnation without investigation is a mark of ignorance. So if you don't want to be ignorant, don't condemn without investigating first, seeing both sides, open up.
Agreed. Excellent. All right. Well, I appreciate it. This is a nice, good, long, beefy chapter, but super important to remember throughout the day. Tolerance. That's a big thing nowadays is, we got to be tolerant. We got to be open for people. So that'd be my parting words.
Let's be one. Let's be one. Yeah, I got to go hop and see patients right now, so we can't do that second chapter, but this was awesome. I thank you very much. I hope the viewers and the listeners enjoy this and take something away from it. Hopefully they got something. I really hope.
And we're going to see Dr. Frank one more time for the opposite of this chapter, which will be forgiveness. So stay tuned for that for next time. Take care.
Peace.